We have talked about line, shape, color, and texture, all the usual suspects. But today, we are wrapping it all up into one big package. Think of this video as the ultimate box set for understanding design. The fundamentals that make every logo, poster, layout actually work. Whether you are a student, a self-taught designer, or someone who's just design curious, by the end of this video, you'll have every tool in your toolkit to see the world like a designer. So let's unbox it. What if I told you that one of the most powerful design tools is also the simplest? Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I am going to revisit my series on design elements and principles because over the last year, I have grown as a YouTuber, and I feel confident that now I could provide a better learning experience for all my design babies out there, and for anyone else who just wants to learn the basics. And each video in this series will dive a little bit deeper than the original series did. In this series, we will talk not only about purpose, but also about the psychology about the purpose of each element in graphic design. If you've ever just looked at a design and felt something, calm, tension, movement, elegance, chances are that line had something to do with it. So today we are going to dive into the first element of graphic design, line. And trust me, by the end of this video, you will never look at lines the same way again. In the most simplest terms, a line is the connection between 2 points. That's it. But this simple act of connecting, it is foundational, not just in graphic design, but also in human perception. Lines help us divide space, define layouts, and guide our eye, but they also carry emotional weight. You could think of lines as the body language of communication. Let's break it down. Vertical lines inherently convey things like strength, power, and growth. Think of things like skyscrapers, tree trunks. They draw your eye up, and that is exactly how they affect the viewer's perception, where horizontal lines feel grounded, stable, and calming. These type of lines mimic the horizon. A flat, wide line suggests rest. These type of lines make me think of a landscape or Zen space. Let's talk diagonal lines. This is where things get really interesting. These type of lines feel unstable by nature. These type of lines, they move, they lean, they suggest things like action and tension. Okay, and finally, let's talk about curved lines. Curved lines are naturally organic, friendly, and emotional. They create rhythm, softness, and even sensuality. Curved lines feel human, and that's why we connect to them instinctively. We are hardwired to connect to lines. And that's not just design, that's neuroscience. Lines guide our gaze. In fact, we read lines similarly to how we read language, from top to bottom, left to right in Western society. And that is why the direction of a line can impact where your eye goes first and how long it stays. Use vertical lines and the viewer pauses. Use diagonal lines and they move. And when you use curved lines in your design, that's when the viewer's eye lingers. That right there is the real power of graphic design, and it starts with a single stroke. Lines don't always need to be drawn. Sometimes your brain automatically fills in the blanks, and these are called implied lines. Like when objects align in a way that suggests a path or direction. Fashion photographers use this technique a lot, placing limbs or props to point to key elements in the layout. And designers use lines in things like web design too. Think arrows, breadcrumbs, or aligned grids that subtly guide the eye. Artists and designers have used lines across history to express identity and movement. For example, Mondrian using straight lines to explore spiritual order, or Art Nouveau's curved lines which mirrored the beauty, elegance, and chaos of nature. You could also see this in the Bauhaus movement where designers embraced geometric lines to represent progress. Okay, so let's talk about real-world use. This is a layout that I'm actually working on. Okay, notice how I used horizontal lines to divide space and create rhythm, and the diagonal lines bring energy to an otherwise calm design. And let's say that I added something like a curved text path. That would suggest fluid motion in this product ad. And one trick that I love, using lines subtly in the background. What it does is it draws attention without being too literal. You could think of it like the visual equivalent to a whisper. Okay, so what did we learn today, kids? These are quick tips for you to master using lines in your design work. Tip number 1, vary line weight for contrast. Tip number 2 is to use grids to align elements and create implied lines. And tip number 3 is to think about the eye flow when placing headlines and visuals. And tip number 4, which could also be an exercise you could do to sharpen your skills, is to try sketching thumbnails with just lines. This will test your visual hierarchy before designing. Lines might seem basic, but they are your first tool in visual storytelling. So next time that you're designing, pause and ask, what are my lines saying and where are they leading? Okay, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, give it a like. And please consider subscribing, because right now I am building a whole upgraded design series. And next week we are tackling shape, which brings its own whole vibes and psychology. Let me know in the comments what type of line you gravitate towards in your own design work. Is it bold, structured, flowy, or unpredictable maybe? And that's all I have for you for now. See you next time. Bye. Color is more than what we see. It's what we feel. It's the whisper in a sunset, the tension in a movie poster. It's the quiet comfort of your favorite sweater. And as designers, we're not just arranging colors. We're shaping the way that people experience the world. Hi, my creatives. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into one of the most powerful elements of graphic design, color. But instead of just memorizing rules, I want us to see color as a language that speaks both to the mind and heart. So first off, let's start with the color wheel. This is basically a map to the creative universe. It organizes colors based on their relationships and shows us where energy clashes. It shows us exactly where harmony rests and also where something unexpected might live. Let's start off with the primary colors. Those are red, blue, and yellow. 3 colors that every other color is composed from. If you mix the primary colors, then you get the secondary colors, which are green, purple, and orange. Mix them again, and then you get the tertiary colors. Blue, green, red, orange, and so on. But here's the beautiful thing. In color theory, every other color is made up from the primary 3. But in practice, all the colors have the ability to tell infinite stories depending on how you use them. The way us as designers use color schemes is to guide the mood. What we are looking at right now is an example of complementary colors, like red and green. They spark drama and contrast. And next we have analogous colors like blue-green. They flow together like watercolors. And next up we have triadic colors. These are evenly spaced on the color wheel. They create balance without losing vibrancy. These aren't just formulas. They are the starting point for emotional architecture. Because color isn't just decoration. It is emotional currency. For example, warm colors, they radiate energy and urgency. While cool colors, they live in calm and contemplation. Red can signal passion or danger. Blue suggests trust and stillness. And yellow is like a burst of optimism. Green anchors us in nature. These associations are centuries old. They are embedded in our cultural memory. Here's a quick story. Back when I was in university, I made a poster with a bold red and black color palette. I thought that it looked powerful. And then my professor, he took a look at it and he's like, why does this poster look so angry? It was not at all what I was going for. I hadn't even considered that. And that's when I really learned that the colors that you choose write the emotional storyline for the work that you produce, whether you intend for it or not. Let's look at Mondrian's bold primaries, almost mathematical in their confidence. Or Monet's soft palettes, it's like a sigh captured in a painting. These are not just random choices. Each hue is a deliberate act of storytelling. And the cool thing about all of this is the color's meaning isn't fixed. It shifts depending on the culture. For example, in the West, white is the color of weddings, where in many Eastern cultures, white is a symbol of mourning. Red might mean danger in one context or wealth in another. As a designer, understanding color and your audience could be the difference between creating something that is very meaningful versus something wildly offensive. And I know literally no one asked for this, but my favorite color combo is a deep teal with a mustard yellow. At first, I thought it was really strange and it wouldn't work, but then when I applied it to my design, it actually fit. It gave this vintage meets modern vibe that I just couldn't get from any other combo. It reminded me that sometimes the best color choices are the ones that you hesitate on for a second. Don't be afraid to experiment with saturation. Turn it all the way up to where it shouts. And then if that doesn't work, then you could pull it down till it whispers. Play around with letting one color dominate the other, or give them equal footing and see which one wins the conversation and the narrative that you're going for. Color is really like the thread between our eyes and emotion. The next time that you're designing, don't just think of it as something that looks nice, but kind of like you're a music composer for the eye. I hope this video gave you a new way to think about color. And if it did, please give it a like and go ahead and subscribe because I make videos like this every single week. That's all I have for you for now. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. Have you ever wondered why some designs feel calm and safe while others feel a little edgy and bold? Maybe even a little intimidating? It's not just color or typography, it's shape. A shape could feel like a whisper, a shout, a hug, or provoke without uttering a single word. In this video, we are going to take a deep dive into the psychology of shape and how you could intentionally use it in your design work. Whether you are a student, a creative professional, or someone just design curious, this video is for you. And trust me, after we're done with this, you are going to look at shapes in a very different way. So let's get into it. Shape is one of the fundamental elements of graphic design. And the way that we define what a shape is any enclosed space created by line, color, or texture. And we usually break up shape into three categories. First, we have geometric. Think circles, squares, or triangles. It is clean, consistent, and reliable. And then next we have organic, which is any shape that is found in nature. And we define this group of shapes as any shape that's irregular, flowing, or emotional. And then finally we have abstract shapes. These are stylized or simplified versions of real things. These are shapes that live in logos, icons, and modern art. And these categories aren't just visual, they are also psychological. Each shape sends a subconscious message. So let's break it down. First up, we have circles, and there is no beginning or end. Circles represent wholeness, unity, eternity. We instinctively associate circles with things like unity, femininity, and harmony. And that's why you tend to find circles in brands like wellness, tech, and community. And fun fact, we literally prefer round shapes. Babies look longer at circular objects, and we as adults tend to describe them as pleasant or soft. And next up, we have squares and rectangles. Squares are stable, dependable, and predictable. They suggest things like structure and trust. You often see squares in branding for finance, education, and government. They imply things like seriousness and professionalism. And next up, we have triangles. They are sharp, they direct, they point energy. A triangle can feel like motion or aggression depending on the direction. It can convey things like progress if it's pointing up, danger if it's pointing down, or speed if it's angled sideways. Throughout history, the triangle has been used for a symbol of hierarchy and power. You can think of things like pyramids and warning signs. Okay, so now let's talk about organic shapes. Organic shapes, they feel alive. They are very much imperfect and expressive. These are the type of shapes that you use when you want your work to feel human, approachable, or artistic. Okay, and last but not least, let's talk about abstract shapes. Abstract shapes evoke feelings without representing a specific object. They are often used in branding to convey concepts. Think of things like innovation, emotion, without literal imagery. Okay, now let's talk about why shapes make us feel certain things. Psychologists believe that our reactions to shapes is both biological and cultural. Biological because our brains are naturally wired to see things like sharp shapes as a threat and curved shapes as safe. And cultural in the sense that squares remind us of systems and buildings, and circles show up in things like religious art and cultural rituals. Studies in neuroscience show that the amygdala lights up more in response to sharp shapes than curved ones. And as you could probably imagine, this has implications in things like UX, advertising, and product design. Okay, so how do you use shapes intentionally? When I'm personally designing, I always like to step back and ask myself, what is this shape saying before the viewer reads any of the text? You can use circles for things like warmth, community, and continuity. Use squares for things like structure, trust, and reliability. Use triangles for things like motion, attention, or innovation. And you could play around and mix shapes to create contrast. A little homework I have for you is to go back and try to make a layout only using shapes. Do this before adding any imagery and type. This will help you build a strong emotional foundation. Let's look at a couple iconic designers and how they use shape. First, we have the Bauhaus movement. The Bauhaus movement was known for being geometric, minimal, and experimental. This movement shaped how we think of form and function in visual design. And next we have Saul Bass. He used minimal shapes to create maximum impact. Think the jagged cutout in The Man with the Golden Arm. One shape and total emotion. And next we have Paula Scher. She plays with contrast. Rigid versus loose. Structured versus wild. These designers don't just use shape randomly. They manipulate emotion. So yeah, shapes aren't just decoration. They could be used as tools for persuasion. Shapes speak before your color, your copy, or your photos do. So next time that you're designing, zoom out a bit and try to think about what your shapes are saying emotionally. I hope this video gave you a new perspective, and if it did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more design psychology breakdowns just like this because I make videos every week. And let me know in the comments, how do you use shape and why? That's all I have for you for now. See you next time. Bye. Let me ask you a question. Close your eyes. And when you picture the word home, what do you see? Do you see a flat picture? Or do you feel the warmth of a fuzzy blanket, the smooth texture of a polished table? Or maybe you even hear the creak of old wood under your feet. That's texture. Hi, my creatives. Today we are talking about the graphic design element texture. And texture is really a design paradox. On one hand, it is nothing but an illusion. And on the other hand, it feels more real than anything else. Texture is all about how things feel or how they appear to feel. You could have soft or hard, glossy or matte, smooth or rough. And there are two types of texture. We have tactile or visual. But in graphic design, we mainly deal with visual texture, which is the illusion of a tactile surface, whereas tactile is the actual feel of a surface. You could think of things like the roughness of sandpaper or the softness of velvet. Visual texture, on the other hand, is the creative look of a specific texture, even though in reality, it is just nothing more than a flat surface. And in philosophy, perception isn't just sight. It is our senses interacting with each other. For example, when we see wood grain printed on a paper, our mind automatically thinks about what wood grain actually feels like. It may even trigger the smell of cedar. The visual texture awakens the association, and artists have leaned into this for centuries. You could think of Van Gogh's brushstrokes, or Japanese prints, or even the Bauhaus posters. Texture is a statement of emotion, serenity, and futurism. And in graphic design today, texture tends to be like soft grain overlays, or linen business cards, or maybe even a glossy versus matte print. Gloss equals luxury, where matte stays quiet and confident. Texture is a carrier of meaning, and each one speaks a language. Smooth tends to equal calm and sleek, where rough, it feels very wild and earthy, and metallic tends to be very futuristic, and fabric textures tend to be comforting and nostalgic. And when you layer textures, it tends to compose emotions. So how could you use texture in your own work? Start by thinking about the message. Are you aiming for something sleek and modern? Then you might want to use smooth, clean textures. Or if you're working with a brand that might be more earthy and organic, go for a more rough and natural texture. An exercise that you could do is by taking one design and swapping the texture. Grain makes it feel more cinematic, where paper fibers are handmade. At the core, it's the same design, but it lives in different realities. And don't be afraid to experiment with different techniques to create texture. You could use brushes, patterns, overlays, blending modes. See how it changes the look and feel of your design work. And don't be afraid to experiment with mixing textures to make something more complex. My challenge for you, next time that you're designing, don't just pick something that looks good. Ask yourself, what do I want the audience to feel? Texture is where design transcends flatness. But okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That's all I have for you today. This is my little spiel about texture. Please tell me in the comments how you like to use texture. And if this video made you think about design in a little different way, then consider subscribing, because I make videos just like this every single week. That's all I have for you for now. Bye! You ever look at a design and feel like you could almost reach out and poke it back? That right there? That's the magic of form. Turning something flat into something that feels like it's alive. Hi friends, I'm Candice Bobchak. I'm a designer, a caffeine-powered thinker, and someone who has spent an embarrassing number of hours obsessing over why something feels real. and others just kind of sit there like a flat pancake. So today we're talking about form, the illusion of depth and weight and presence that gives design its soul. So form is basically what happens when a shape gets a glow up. Shape is flat. It is the outline, the silhouette, the what. And form is the how light wraps around it, how it sits in a space, how it sits in relation to everything else around it. It is a circle versus a sphere, a square versus a cube, or in design terms, a logo sketch on a napkin versus a brand you could feel through its packaging. Form is where design stops being decoration and becomes part of elaborate storytelling. Form is what makes your work believable. It creates hierarchy, mood, and even emotion. When something has form, we instinctively know where to look first. Our eye is wired to follow the light and shadow. It is the same instinct that makes us stare at a candle flame, or the way that sunlight hits your coffee cup in the morning. Good use of form says this is what matters. It's not just simply about making things look pretty. It's about making something that feels right. All right, let's get practical. Here is how you could create an actual illusion of form in design. No 3D software required. Number 1, value and shading. Light and dark are your best friends. A solid understanding of value is half the battle. It is what gives your design structure. If your design still reads well in grayscale, congratulations. You nailed form. Number 2, highlights and specular reflection. Highlights are your sparkle moment, that little shine on glass or metal or eyes in a portrait. It is the visual equivalent to charisma. But don't overdo it, because subtlety is sexy. Number 3, gradients through color temperature. Gradients get a bad rep from early 2000s word art trauma, but they can be actually quite powerful when used correctly. A shift from warm to cool tones instantly creates depth. Think sunset lighting versus fluorescent office light lighting. Both are real, both are emotional, but one is clearly better than the other. Number 4, cast shadows and ambient occlusion. Cast shadows ground things. They say things like, hey, this object exists in a space. Ambient occlusion, where two surfaces meet, it gives realism. You could fake it with things like a blur or a soft brush. The eye believes it. Number 5, overlap and perspective. Nothing says depth like one thing slightly covering another. Overlap, it's hierarchy in disguise. And, if you're brave, play with one-point perspective. It's geometry meets drama. And number 6, texture material. Texture is how you tell the viewer what something would physically feel like. Smooth, rough, matte, glossy. It is the difference between silk and sandpaper. Both are valid moods. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to take a circle and make it deliciously round. Step 1, we start with our basic shape. Step 2, we pick our light source. The top left is always a very safe bet. Now all you have to do is add your midtones and adjust the shadows. Make sure that you have just a tiny bit of highlight. We don't want to go full disco ball. We want this to still look believable. And finally, cast a shadow under it to make it feel more grounded. And boom, this circle just got promoted to a sphere. We gave it life, and all it took was value, light, and intention. Here's the thing. Form is about relationship, how things relate to light, space, and emotion. Every design element, text, shape, image, they all live in relation to something else. And when you understand that, your work, it gets depth, and it's not just visually, but even more importantly, conceptually. A good designer doesn't just add shadows. They understand why the lighting is there in the first place. Here's a mini exercise that I have for you. Pick one shape, circle, triangle, square. Spend a minute making it feel real and 3D. Play around with the value, the highlights, the shadows. Don't aim for perfection, aim for believability. And then you could step back and ask yourself, where does the light come from? What does this project say about space? And that right there is how you could start developing your designer intuition. Okay, now here's a rapid fire round of mistakes and quick fixes. If your design looks muddy, check the values. If your design looks fake, it might be the highlights. You could adjust them to be more subtle. And if it feels flat, then your light direction might be inconsistent. It's absolutely okay though. All of us have committed shadow crimes. The key is to practice making it intentional. So there you have it, that's form. It gives your shapes a sense of life. It's not just about shadows and gradients. It is about understanding light, depth, and connection. Start small, stay curious, and remember, every great designer starts with a question. How does this feel in space? Okay, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe because I make videos just like this every single week. And that's all I have for you right now. See you next time. Bye. Okay, so let's talk about value. And no, I don't mean a value meal. I don't mean fries and a drink. Although, you know what? That sounds pretty good right now. I mean value as a design element. The scale between light and dark that gives your work structure, contrast, and depth. It is one of those things that could quietly make or break your composition. If your work doesn't have enough value contrast, then it's basically like visual soup. Everything blends together and it's kind of bland. Your focus disappears. And suddenly you have a beautiful mess that is just like, meh. So today I want to go deep on this. Not just how to use value, but how to think about it. Because it is both super practical and kind of poetic when you really think about it. Most of design is kind of funny that way. You start adjusting levels in Photoshop and next thing you know, you're contemplating the difference between light and dark like a philosopher. Okay, let's start with the hands-on stuff. Value is all about the lightness and darkness of a color, right? It lets you create visual hierarchy, rhythm, and a sense of depth. It is one of those things that you can use to guide the viewer's eye. Because, as we talked about on this channel, our brains love contrast. It is literally irresistible to us as a human species. You could think of value as the spotlight operator in design. It could quite literally shine a light on what gets seen first and what fades into the background, as well as how your viewer experiences your work. If you ever look at a poster and immediately notice the headline, or maybe it's the image or the tagline, congratulations, you just experienced value doing its job. But if everything screams for attention equally, then it's chaos, visual noise. Like every band member decided to do a solo all at once. Here's a great quick check. Convert your design to grayscale. No colors, no distractions, just pure light and dark. If suddenly your design turns flat, like one gray blob, that is your visual cue to add more contrast. Because even the most beautifully chosen color palette won't save you if your value is off. Good design needs range, deep shadows, bright highlights, those soft midtones that tie everything together. That is what gives your design life, breathing room, range. Now here's where we get a little bit sentimental. Because value isn't just a technical skill, it's a mindset. Think about it. Light and dark have always symbolized balance, right? Without darkness, light doesn't mean anything. And without light, darkness has no definition. Design works exactly the same way. You need contrast, not just visually, but emotionally. It is what gives your design work energy. Value reminds us that tension isn't a bad thing. It is the very thing that creates balance. Those subtle shifts between light and dark, bold and soft, loud and quiet, that is where depth comes from. And I think that's what makes value very poetic. It is like the visual version of growth. You need those darker moments to appreciate the highlights. Okay, yes, I know, I got really philosophical over a color slider, right? But welcome to my brain. So when I am adjusting value in a layout, it's not just about visibility. It is about storytelling. What is the emotional rhythm here? Where do I want the eye to rest? Where should it feel heavy, calm, and intense? Because value isn't one of those things that is just seen, it is felt. So here are some quick tips about how you could train your eye for value. Okay, let's get practical again. How do you actually get better at using value? Tip number 1, start with black and white. When you strip color away, it forces you to focus more on contrast and balance. I used to do this when I was designing layouts in university. It was always my fail-safe to see if everything was balanced. If the black and white version looked balanced, then I knew that the color version would too. Number 2, and you guys have heard me talk about this one before, Do the squint test. Seriously, squint at your design. If you could still tell where the main focal point is, then your contrast and value is solid. And if not, then you have some fine-tuning that you need to do. Tip number 3, experiment with extremes. Take one of your designs and duplicate it. Make one of the versions super high contrast, really bold, really graphic. Then make another version with soft and low contrast. You could give it more of a dreamy and calm feel. That will allow you to instantly feel how value changes how your work is perceived. And that has to be my favorite thing about design. You could instantly shift the whole mood just by adjusting how light or dark something is. Value might be simple on paper. Light, dark, done. But in reality, it could be the very thing that holds everything together. It is the reason that typography pops on a background. It is why your eye naturally flows through a poster or a web layout. It is the quiet backbone of good composition. And maybe that is why I love it so much. Because it teaches us that design, and maybe life too, isn't about staying in one extreme. It is about finding balance. The gradients between light and dark, bold and subtle, simple and complex. Somewhere in that in-between is where all the real magic happens. So the next time that you're working on a design project, don't just ask if it looks good. Ask if it feels balanced. Because great design, it doesn't only look right, it feels right. All right, I said the word value maybe 50 times in this whole video. So if your brain starts to sound like a cash register, you're not alone. I'm there right now. Okay, but seriously, I would love to know, are you that designer that tends to design with high contrast? Or do you tend to lean more to soft and subtle palettes? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. And if you enjoy these deep dives into the elements of graphic design, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more because I make videos like this every single week. And that's all I have for you right now. See you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, picture this. You walk into a room and you see a chair that is gigantic. Like you need a ladder to climb up to even sit in it. It makes you feel tiny, maybe vulnerable. And now let's flip that. Imagine seeing the world's tiniest chair, something that looks like doll furniture. Suddenly it feels like a toy and not something to take seriously. That right there, that's scale. It's not about just making things bigger or smaller. It's about how size affects our psychology. In graphic design, scale tells us what is important. It sets the mood and it shapes how people interact with your work. Today we are going deep into the psychology of scale in graphic design, and I will show you practical ways that you could use it to grab people's attention, create hierarchy, and make your design impossible to ignore. Trust me, once you get this, you will never look at a poster, a website, or a logo the same way again. Okay, but let's start with the basics. Scale is simply the relative size of elements within a composition. Notice how I said relative. Because scale, it's not just about whether something is objectively big or small. It's about how those sizes relate to everything else within the same design. Scale is often confused with proportion. The difference is proportion is about the relationship of parts within one single object. For example, let's say that you're looking at a face and their eyes are too big for their head, whereas scale is about comparing one element to another. An example of this is a headline versus body text. So when you are working with design, scale is one of the first tools to guide the viewer's eye. A giant element, it screams like, look here first. Where a smaller element, it kind of whispers, it's like, hey, I'm here too. But here's where it gets interesting. Scale isn't just a design trick. It plays with our brain in a way that we often don't realize. For example, number 1, attention and focus. The human brain is wired to notice the unusual. So if everything on a page is all the same size, then nothing stands out. But if one of those elements breaks the mold and gets bigger, it hijacks your attention. You could think of it like being at a crowded party. If someone's suddenly shouting, then you turn your head. And when it comes to design, big scale shouts. Number 2, it affects your emotion and your mood. Large scale, it creates a sense of power, dominance, and intimidation. Imagine a giant billboard looming over the street. It doesn't just inform you, It almost controls your environment. On the flip side, smaller scale creates a feeling of intimacy, delicacy, or vulnerability. And luxury brands really lean into this. Think about a perfume bottle, for instance, where the type, it's so small that it feels like it's whispering at you, telling you a little secret for only you two to know. And number 3, it affects our perception. This one is very basic, but also so powerful. We automatically associate size with importance. Bigger, more important. Smaller, less important. That is why in apps, the main action button is often bigger than anything else. You don't have to think about it, you just know where to click. And number 4, there's a human factor to it. We also tend to compare the size of our own bodies. If someone is larger than life, it feels more monumental. And if someone's smaller than us, like let's say a little kid, they feel more playful. That is why billboards, sculptures, or even huge displays work so well. They are absolutely impossible to ignore because they throw your sense of normal scale out the window. Okay, so now that we know the psychology behind scale, let's talk about how to use it in a practical way in your design work. Number 1, visual hierarchy. This is probably the number 1 way to use scale. Headers are larger than subheadings, which are larger than body text. On a poster, a band name is usually huge, where the date and time, they tend to be smaller. And the fine print, it's even smaller than that. Scale is literally the way that we teach the audience how to read a poster. Number 2, contrast and impact. Here's a pro tip. Don't just make things slightly bigger. Always really exaggerate it. Make it dramatically larger for huge impact. You could think about Apple product ads. It's always like a giant close-up of an iPhone, and then they pair it with tiny, elegant text. The contrasts in the ads make it feel more premium. Number 3, brand recognition. Scale also matters in branding. A good logo needs to work on a massive billboard, and it also needs to function on a tiny app icon. If your design only works when it's huge, then it's not versatile enough. A practical exercise that you could do is shrink your logo down like 16 pixels. If it is still recognizable, then you're golden. Number 4, spatial illusion and depth. Designers also use scale to create the illusion of depth. Large elements tell you that it's in the foreground, while smaller elements look like they're in the background. And suddenly, a flat design feels like it's in the 3-dimensional world. Posters, book covers, even websites use this. It is a way for us to create dynamic designs. Storytelling through scale. Scale is also very symbolic. Oversized elements can feel larger than life, like for instance a political poster with a giant fist taking over the frame. And undersized elements can make something feel small, fragile, and undermined. One of my favorite examples of this is anti-smoking campaigns. They always show a cigarette that's at giant scale, and it's towering over the person. Instantly, you feel the imbalance of power. Okay, so let's talk about a few common mistakes. Making everything the same size. If everything shouts, then nothing gets heard. Mistake number 2, not enough contrast. If the headline is just a little bit bigger than the text beneath it, boring. You gotta push it further. Mistake number 3, forgetting functionality. If your text is so small that no one could read it, then you've lost the point. It needs to be legible, even from far away. Websites need scalable text for functionality. This actually reminds me of when I was in 2nd grade. I went through this phase where I was writing things minuscule. I ended up getting scolded by the teacher because she couldn't read my paragraphs. But anyway, here's a couple exercises that you can do to master scale. The exaggeration game. Take your layout and make one element 5 times bigger, and then make another one 5 times smaller. See how it changes the tone. Number 2, hierarchy redesign. Take a magazine ad and redesign it and make the headline much bigger. And then make one of the call to actions a bit bolder. And then maybe you could even play around with some background elements and make those a little smaller. Number 3, the distance test. Print out your design and tape it to a wall. Step back like 10 feet. What do you notice first? And if it's not the thing that you want people to see first, then change your scale. Okay, guys. So the next time that you are designing, don't just think about color, shape, and text. Think about the scale. Ask yourself, what do you want the audience to notice first? What emotion am I trying to trigger? Do I want it to whisper or do I want it to shout? Scale is one of the simplest tools in design, but it is also one of the most powerful because it functions on a psychological level. Use it well and your designs will not just look good. They will speak directly to your audience's mind. Okay guys, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Shout out to the commenter who gave me this idea. And hit like if you like this video and subscribe for more content just like this because I put videos out every single week. I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Typography isn't just about letters on a page. It is about personality, emotion, and identity. It is how a wedding invite whispers elegance, while a bold sans serif on a billboard, it shouts confidence. It is the voice behind every single message, whether it is calm, playful, or serious. Today we're diving into typography, arguably the most powerful element of graphic design, and how we as graphic designers use it as a tool to shape how people feel and respond, and also how you can use it to level up your creative work. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Candice Bobchak. I'm a graphic designer with a passion for art, and I come on this channel every single week and share tips and tricks with you so you can live your best creative life. And today's star of the show, typography. Typography is arguably the backbone of graphic design. Out of all the graphic design elements, typography is the one that directly engages with the audience. Before people notice your colors or composition, most likely they are reading. So let's start with the basics. What is typography? Typography is the art and technique of arranging type. Sounds pretty simple, right? But no, actually there's a whole world of psychology and design decisions going behind it. For example, a single letter is already design. Think about the letter G. There is a circular bowl with a crossbar and a little spur. These aren't random. The letter G is made up of geometric and organic shapes that come together and make a recognizable symbol. Now let's multiply that across the entire alphabet. And suddenly, you have a typeface, a family of letter forms that are made to feel cohesive. What makes typography so magical is these letter forms, they are not just cohesive, they are expressive. Typography isn't just about communicating words. Equally as important is communicating how those words feel. Every typeface has what we call the anatomy of type. This is where design gets nerdy and fun. For example, the ascender is part of a lowercase letter that stretches above the X height, like the tall stem of a lowercase h, where the descender is the opposite. It dips below the baseline, like, for instance, a lowercase y. The bowl is that rounded part of letters like O or G, and the spine is that curving line, like in an S. And these tiny details, they change the entire personality of a font. A rounded terminal feels friendly and approachable, where a sharp terminal, it feels more bold and dramatic. The best analogy I heard is this. Typefaces are like voices. Some are deep and formal, while others are conversational and casual. Some are even playful and quirky. And just like voices, they all carry a mood. And here's the thing, without even realizing it, people judge typefaces subconsciously. For example, if you're designing something like a financial report, you probably want to use a clean serif font like Garamond or Times. It automatically gives you a sense of tradition, trust, and stability. Switch that out for Comic Sans, and then it would feel more like a joke. Even the numbers wouldn't feel serious. And script fonts, on the other hand, feel more personal, like someone took the time to handwrite a message. That is why wedding invitations and greeting cards, they kind of lean off of them. They spark things like intimacy and warmth. And let's not forget about readability. A brand could have the coolest typeface ever, but if no one could read the message, then the point is kind of lost. Good typography balances the function of communication and how the message is received. Typography hasn't always been as accessible as it is today. Back in the 1400s, typefaces were carved into wooden blocks or cast into lead in a printing press. The first typefaces were simple, practical, and legible, and made to last through repeated pressing. Then came design movements that reshaped typography, like my favorite, the Bauhaus movement that happened in the 1920s. They pushed for simplicity of geometric forms. In the 1960s, psychedelic posters exploded with hand-drawn lettering that was more about art than legibility. And then now, during the digital age, we have tens of thousands of typefaces all at our fingertips. Some are functional, some are expressive, but all of them are rooted in the same principle. Typefaces are always designed with a purpose in mind. Let's break down some of the categories of typefaces that you will definitely run into. First up, we have serif typefaces. These have those little feet or extensions at the ends of the letters. Think of typefaces like Times New Roman. They feel traditional, credible, and bookish, perfect for long reads and formal documents. And then next up, we have sans serif, literally without serifs. These are clean, modern, and minimal. The top dog in this category is Helvetica. Sans serifs dominate tech, branding, and websites because they are so clear. And next up, we have slab serif. These have serifs, but they're chunky and bold. The typeface Rockwell is a great example of that. They feel strong, confident, and assertive. Next up, we have script, cursive, calligraphic, or handwriting style fonts. They feel human and personal and sometimes luxurious. And then next up, we have black letter, those medieval Gothic style letters. They scream history, drama, or metal band vibes. And then finally, we have decorative or display. These are wild cards. They are designed purely for impact. They are great in small doses. They are usually used for posters or headlines. One pro tip I have for you. Think of typefaces as actors. Would you cast a Shakespearean actor in a slapstick comedy? Probably not. It would feel very much out of place. Fonts are kind of the same. You choose them based on the role that you want them to play. Now let's talk about function. Functional typography is all about clarity first and style second. But even within clarity, there is so much room for creativity. You can lay out your typography in a simple justified block. It feels traditional, like a newspaper or an old book. Clean, calm, and structured. Or you could use things like columns with contrast. Split text into multiple columns, increase the size of the headers, and use capital letters for emphasis. This feels dynamic while staying legible. You could play with the contrast of weight and size. If you use bold headers with a lighter body of text, this creates a clear sense of hierarchy. Negative space frames the type so that the eye knows exactly where to look. A bold decorative font for the title with supporting messages in clean all caps. It feels assertive, perfect for magazines or ads. Or you could go for a classy serif layout. Think about high-end magazines. Large serifed headers paired with small body text aligned creatively. It could feel sophisticated, like the design itself is wearing a tailored suit. All of these use type to support the message, not distract from it. And next up, we have the fun side of it, typography as art. Sometimes typography isn't just about reading, it's more about seeing. In some experimental posters, typography is laid out into shapes, like a face or an object, and it becomes more about illustration. Or there's designers out there who play around with 3D typography. 3D generated type, it takes the words off the page and gives them depth, shadow, and even texture. And suddenly the words, they feel more like a physical object. And there's other designers out there who push legibility to its limits. They use typography to create an overall texture. And with these, you feel the letters more than you read them. This is typography at its most expressive state. It is less about conveying information and more about creating a visual mood statement. And while you wouldn't use this for, let's just say, a subway map, it is incredibly powerful for advertising and sometimes branding when you want to make an emotional splash. Okay, let's wrap up this whole segment with some practical tips. Tip number 1, don't just pick a font because you like it. Pick it because it serves the purpose of the audience. Tip number 2 is pair fonts thoughtfully. An example of this would be pairing a serif font with a bold sans serif headline. It creates a nice balance, and contrast is definitely your friend here. Tip number 3, use decorative fonts sparingly. Think of them like hot sauce. You don't want to douse your entire dish in it. A little bit goes a really long way. And the next tip I have for you is always test your design at different sizes. What looks good on a poster might look terribly wrong on an Instagram post. And my final tip for you is consistency is key. Don't use like 5 different fonts on one page. Pick 2 or 3 max, and let hierarchy and weight do the rest. Typography is so much more than just choosing fonts on a drop-down menu. It is voice, it is history, it is psychology, all mashed up into one. And once you start paying attention to it, then you see it everywhere. Every sign, every ad, every menu. Someone chose that to try and speak to you. So anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. If you found this little breakdown helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. And feel free to share this video with your fellow creatives. I would love to know in the comments, what's your go-to typeface right now? Until next time, keep designing, keep experimenting. That's all I have for you for now. Bye-bye. All right, quick question. Have you ever looked at a design and just thought it feels expensive, but you couldn't really explain why? Spoiler alert, it wasn't the fonts or the colors. Most likely, it was due to space. Space in graphic design is like silence in music. It's invisible, but it's kind of the thing that makes everything else work. And today I am going to show you how space could literally change how people feel about your design. I am a designer, photographer, and artist, and I like coming here on this channel and sharing my tips and tricks with you every single week. And this video today is part of my series on design elements and principles. Today's topic is space, both practical and psychological. Okay, but first we have to start with the basics. There are 2 types of space in graphic design, negative and positive. You could think of positive space as the stuff, the shapes, the typography, the objects. And negative space is the nothing. It is the background, the breathing room, the silence between notes. And the absolute best example would be the yin and yang symbol. Both sides, they balance each other out, and one doesn't exist without the other. And here's the trick that only graphic designers understand. Negative space, it isn't actually empty. Your brain activates it. The human brain, it's actually wired to find shapes and complete patterns. So negative space becomes part of the design. Think about the FedEx logo. Once you notice the arrow in the negative space, you can't unsee it. It's very similar to the WWF panda logo. The entire panda is built out of suggestion. Okay, so let's talk about why space is more than just aesthetics. It changes how people actually feel. First, we'll talk about cognitive load. When design is overcrowded, then our brain has to work harder. It tends to feel very stressful. Whereas a design where there's space, it feels more calm, and it is easier for the viewer to understand your message. And this is the reason why Apple ads feel so luxurious. They are masters of using negative space. They literally give your brain a break. And next, we'll talk about focus. Negative space, it acts like a spotlight. Whatever sits in the middle of the negative space automatically feels more important. And next up, we'll talk about emotional response. Space in design feels intentional. It could be calm or expressive, whereas crowded design, it feels chaotic and cheap. It is very overwhelming. Okay, here's a quick story for you guys. I once saw a cocktail menu at a bar, and every single drink that they had was crammed onto a single page. Instead of a menu, it looked more like tax paperwork. And then when I went back to the same bar, you could tell that they hired a designer. The new redesigned menu, it had breathing room and space, and it wasn't all just one page. And suddenly, that bar, it felt more upscale. Even though the drinks, they were the same. It's just the space on the menu, it changed my perception. Okay, so now let's talk about how designers use space. We need to talk a little bit about proximity. Proximity basically means the space between shapes. If shapes are close together, they feel related. And if shapes are far apart, then they feel separate. It's kind of like social distancing, but for design. And then next we have overlap. When objects are overlapping, then your brain decides which one is closer. It is an instant way to create depth. And next we'll talk about opacity. Opacity softens barriers between positive and negative space. Layering can suggest dominance, closeness, or softness, depending on how you use it. And then next we'll talk a little bit about light and shadow. Shadows create dimension. Hard shadows create drama. And soft shadows, that makes your design feel more approachable. And next up we'll talk about perspective. Things that are farther away look smaller, lighter, maybe blurrier. Even in things like 2D design, you could fake closeness with scale and sharpness. And one quick psychology note, All of these techniques, they mirror the real actual human perception. It is the same way that we read a social space. Closer people feel more personal, whereas distance, it feels more detached. So how can we use space with intention? Here's a few things that you could do. Step number 1 is create a focal point. Guide the viewer's eye first to what matters the most. Step number 2 is work on balancing the layout. Symmetry feels calm where asymmetry feels more energetic. Step number 3, set the visual tone. Wide open space, it naturally feels more high-end, whereas packed space, it feels more budget-friendly. And finally, step number 4, define the brand's personality. Think about luxury brands. They use lots of white space, whereas discount stores, everything is crammed together. Okay, an example of this is like when I was working on an absinthe bar menu for a client. All the spacing I used in that menu, it was very intentional. And it created a whole different vibe that went along with their rebrand. Okay, and here's a couple quick tips that you could use right away. Tip number 1, use the squint test. Squint out your design. Does one certain thing stand out, or is there other elements that are competing? Tip number 2 is treat space as a frame. Don't think about it as the background. It is like the stage that your elements are standing on. And the final tip I have for you is sometimes break the rules. Sometimes crowding everything on one side and leaving the other side empty, it creates tension. And tension is visually interesting. Controlled imbalance, it could be powerful when used right. So space isn't just emptiness. It's not wasted. It's a tool. It is how you reduce stress and create balance. It actually sets the tone and it guides the viewer's eye. Space is the very thing that transforms your design from decoration to communication. I would love to know in the comments, what's one piece of design work that you think uses space so well? Did it actually change how you felt? And if you found this video helpful, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe because I make videos just like this every single week. That's all I have for you for now. See you next time. Bye-bye. And that, my friends, is the complete box set of the graphic design elements. Every piece of visual communication starts here, and the rest, your personal style, your spark, your story. So if you found this video helpful, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe. Maybe rewatch the parts that you want to brush up on. And that's all I have for you for now. I'll see you next time. Bye.